Hello, hello, and welcome. My name is Taras Spalding. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. I'm the co-author of 10 Preparation Stages for Starting a Successful Business, and this book is really designed and written to help you as a founder succeed. And lucky me, I have friends here with me today to talk about some really important topics about packaging and pricing and just figuring it out so that you nail it and you're extremely profitable and successful with your business. Today, I'd like to introduce my great friend, Greg Keller. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And I'd also like to introduce Eric Lowe, and thank you very much for not only being here, but hosting us in this amazing recording studio.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here and chat today.
Yeah, well, we're in Audio Inn, and it's in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is the most coolest and high-tech recording studio. It's making me nervous. Let's just be real here. But we're not only is this a tell that you're an entrepreneur at heart, but also you have another project, which is Credo. And we'd love to talk to you about that. And of course, Greg, you are semi-retired. You offer all of your mentoring and advice for startups. But let's talk about your last and most successful company, which is Frontera.
Certainly. Yeah, so my background has all been in the food space. So started with Kraft, long time, spent 17 years there, and then in 99 left to start Frontera with three other partners, Manny Valdez, Jean Marie Brownson, and Chef Rick Bayless. And so from 99 to 2016, we went through lots of iterations that I'm sure we're going to spend some time talking about, and grew the brand, and were able to sell it to Conagra Foods in 2016.
Congratulations on an exit. Now, Eric, this is like your third iteration of being an entrepreneur. Please tell us a little bit about Credo.
Yeah, so Credo is my first, I would say, true venture. Audio Inn was a passion project that survived. It's a whole different story, but yeah, Credo. So I'm a technical founder. So I came from a scientific software engineering background. And even with Audio Inn under my belt, I didn't really think I had entrepreneurship in me.
Really?
And so, yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. With super high imposter syndrome. And so with Credo, my intention was I want this to be a tech startup, but am I the one that should be running it? Should I be the CEO? That's a big question mark. And yeah, it was, through a lot of going through accelerators and really pushing myself that finally grew the confidence to get to where we are today. But yeah, Credo is a plant data company. And what we're doing is pretty interesting. And how we got there is also a really cool story.
And I am so excited that you are sharing it with all of our other founder listeners today. As mentioned in the 10 preparation stages and starting a successful business, one of the most important parts of figuring out to go or no go with business is if you have the right packaging and the right pricing, that not only makes sense for you as an entrepreneur or as a business, but also something that people will actually buy and spend their own money for because they're experiencing the value. I would love to hear the stories about your packaging, exploration as well as pricing. Now, Greg, can we start with your story with Frontera?
Frontera it started out as the restaurant, but then our first product introduction was salsa. And Frontera salsa was all about authentic Mexican salsa. So at the time, if you think back to early 2000s, it was all about chip and dip, Tex-Mex type of things. And Frontera was very different. So we wanted to be in a different package. So we were in a tall, thin jar, and it was our look. It felt great. But the big problem that we had was that it didn't fit onto the grocery shelf. So as a result, we either ended up way on the top or way on the bottom. And, as people know, basically from waist level to eye level is where you want to be on the grocery shelf. We couldn't be there. Um, so after 7 years of trying to figure out, okay, do we keep this iconic jar? We finally heard from one customer and they said, no, I'm not moving you to this space. We finally made the decision to change the jar size. We still went to a proprietary jar. We didn't go with a regular Tostitos jar or something like that. But by making that move, we were able to get into the spot that we wanted to be and immediately saw a 40% increase in volume just by being in the right spot on the shelf. So that took us to another level and gave us finally the confidence that we did have a product that could make it. So the packaging and getting it right and being able to, make the decision to move to something that people were telling us for a long time and away from that proprietary jar helped us immensely in having a product that was ultimately able to grow it to the volume that we needed it to grow to.
And that's amazing because your customers liked the iconic jar, but what you're saying was that the distribution channel was the hindrance with the natural packaging that you were leaning toward.
It didn't work on the shelf, and because of that, we were never able to be in the spot that we wanted to be in. So we ended up in different sections of the store. So anyway, by making that change, it really was. I mean, there were a couple of key moments, but that change was one of the key moments of the company to make sure that we could continue and thrive.
Well, and that's a really strong testament that checking the packaging with the customer isn't enough. You really have to look at the sell-through placement and all that other good such, which is absolutely important, not only for consumer packaged goods, like in your case, Frontera salsa, but also it so applies also with software and other technology.
Yep.
Now, Eric, you are creating a plant-based packaging for a plant-based product. How exciting is this? Can you talk to us a little bit about your packaging decisions? Because I know you're really pushing the envelope here.
Yeah, so, being a startup, we have the opportunity to reevaluate how things are done. And exactly two of our biggest priorities is to be more sustainable and to really live up to that mission. And so one of it was packaging in general, right? Why is it so hard to recycle? Well, it's because of ink. Ink clogs up the whole system, literally.
Really?
And so when we were evaluating what kind of products could we use, of course, you use cardboard. We even looked at mushroom-based packaging, and you literally had to grow that on demand. So that wasn't going to work with scale. We were looking at corn-based peanuts, all sorts. There's a lot of really cool, sustainable, innovative packaging out there. But it either didn't meet our unit costs, or it was too expensive, or there's going to be scale issues. And really what it came down to was just, well, how do we just get rid of ink? And the idea was, what if we just switch to laser etching? Which seems like such a simple concept, right? Of like, oh yeah, laser etcher in front of a conveyor belt that's stamping out product. How hard could that be? Well, it turns out that is quite hard. It's a big ask, and no one domestically wanted to take that challenge. And so, unfortunately, we had to go overseas, but we were able to get it done. And what's really cool is, yeah, we're the first company to not to use any ink. It's all 100% laser etched, and you can't even tell that it's different. It looks just like ink. We can do different colors. And so we did the same thing with our plastics. So again, right, and this is also down to our sensors. So our sensors is the heart of our entire system that's capturing all the data that we care about and that the consumers are interacting with. But the other two big problems are we're generating more e-waste in the world and we're generating more plastic in the world. We don't want either of those things. So we solve this with two different ways. One with our business model of completely just removing that hardware expense and burden off of the consumer and onto us. And that allows us to keep things more into the supply chain and so far less out of like manufacturing and this disappears into landfill somewhere. And then that came to the plastics. So plastics, everybody was pushing us to injection molding. That's just the way it's done. For us, the way it's done is 3D additive manufacturing. That's the future. That's the future that's been promised for decades.
Well, I'd like for you to explain that.
Okay,
Because not many people understand exactly what that technique and impact mean.
Yeah, so the difference really is injection molding is a high throughput manufacturing process, right? So you create a tool, that tool can now stamp out hundreds of thousands, millions of these units perfectly every single time. So on the business side, it's great because your unit costs are low. But on everyone else's side, it's awful, right? Because it's just more plastic, more inventory, more warehousing, just more stuff in the world. The benefit of 3D additive manufacturing, but the biggest key with injection molding is, and this is kind of the core concepts of building a business or anything, right, is iteration.
Mm-hmm.
You can't iterate with injection molding. Once you create that tool, you just spent almost $500,000 to create that tool, you're locked in. And guess what? That is also locked in to wherever that facility is. So if your facility was in China during the pandemic, you just now can't get anything made because they shut down, and you have to now get another tool made somewhere else and spend another $500,000 to just create that die cast tool. So it's very inefficient in my opinion, right? Of like, well, what if we want to iterate on our design? I can't do that. And so that's where the pros of 3D, but the other side of 3D additive manufacturing is the design itself. So injection molding is prohibitive of organic design. So things that look more natural, have more curvatures and all of that. Injection molding cannot do that. 3D additive manufacturing can do all of that. The only difference though is just cost per unit. That's the biggest hangup of this technology, right? But in terms of quality, we have access to more sustainable plastics. We have access to iteration because you can now print one unit to hundreds of thousands of units, and it doesn't add any extra time. All you're doing is adding extra printers. It allows you to scale and contract, so you can essentially keep up with demand if you need it, right? Kick up more printers if you need it, scale down. Also resolves the logistical problems. Oh, if China shuts down, not a big problem. I'll get some more printers stateside in India, anywhere I want. We can just restart manufacturing that same product. And so really it was the price point. That's the sticking point. And so we were able to actually get that price point to not be that far off from injection molding. And now when you take into account all those extra variables that no one's really considering other than just the actual unit per cost, then it becomes like, this is actually a way better solution because now we're not quite ready to go outside yet. So my indoor units can use cheaper plastic. And then when we're ready to make the outdoor units, we'll use more UV outdoor resistant plastic, right? But it's not every single product needs that plastic. I can change depending on the product use case. And then the other benefit of 3D is it's recyclable. I can melt this stuff down and reuse it. So all that plastic, all that's, if we have, we will have churn. So anything we're getting returned, we capture it, we recycle that plastic, reprint new plastic, put it on the sensors, and then send it back out, right? So we're really closing that loop on waste.
That's amazing. I love how the impact component is intrinsical in all of your decisions and design, and it's balanced off with the unit cost economics. But there's another aspect of both of your stories that I think is very important when it comes to packaging and pricing. And both of you mentioned it, which is like the competition or what the market is basically used to. Tell me a little bit about Greg, who you were competing against, and how you're creating a market perception and differentiation, not only with the quality of your product, but also through your packaging and pricing, as well as your distribution channel differences.
Once again, thinking about where we were and what we were doing, we're competing against mainstream players, Tostitos, Old El Paso, and Pace. And then there was this whole second level of the premium guys. So Desert Pepper, Renfro's, and some others were kind of the higher end. All of those guys were doing something a little bit different. They were doing kind of the Tex-Mex, and we were doing kind of more authentic Mexican. So that was one differentiation point. The other thing is, as we started thinking about the product, we knew that we had to stay within a price range. So as an example, the mainstream guys were at about $2.99 or $3 at that point in time. And we said, we could live $1 more than them. And if we can get that product and keep our product right in that range, $1 more, people would be willing to pay for it. We knew that if we got too far above that, if we went $2 or $3 more, the market shrinks considerably. So in order to maximize the size of the market and be able to attract a consumer that would be willing to pay a premium price, we knew that we had to be within certain tolerances. So that went into how we designed the product, the label, everything went into that so that we could make sure that we could make our margin while hitting that. And one of the things, two of the partners, both Rick Bayless and Jean Marie, they were chefs. So product quality was never going to suffer in this. So we had to find ways to keep it at that price point without sacrificing any of the quality that Rick Bayless and Jean Marie, demanded would be there. And that was really a key to success for us.
Absolutely agree. And my family has been basically eating Frontera for decades. I think it's like one of the first meals that Kevin and I made together, just because of the quality. But I love how all these other decisions of how to get it to the Spalding household, is right on. Because if it was overpriced or just not distributed correctly, then we probably never would have be like.
It wouldn't be
Yeah.
widely accepted, and that's what we were going for. We wanted to make sure that the product would be right for the audience in Chicago, which was very much a contemporary, I don't know, progressive is the right word, but eating, people would eat and try different things. But one of the things that we thought during all of our planning sessions was, would it sell in Peoria? We were in Illinois at the time, so Peoria, which was basically more rural, and we wanted to make it not only for upscale Chicago people that are used to eating out at high-end restaurants and things like that, but how would it work for everybody?
Eric, I love what you're doing because it's so innovative on taking care and reporting on plant health and also delivering and communicating exactly what's needed. But this whole concept has been around for a while. I would say yours is definitely one of the most advanced. When you look at the competition that have been before you and their whole pricing and packaging, as well as their go-to-market strategy and who they were selling it to, you've certainly pivoted and gone away from what was mainstream before. Can you talk a little bit more about the competition and how you're just moving the needle in a different direction?
Yeah, so with IoT devices, pretty much since Nest came out, they've always been treated as smart home products. And so with any plant care IoT, it was automatically, oh, this is the next smart home product. And that really is the mispositioning of a lot of our competitors is this product has nothing to do with a home. Yeah, plants are in homes to make it aesthetically pretty and beautiful and bring other benefits, but it's really more tied to the plant, and wherever the plant is the critical part. And so the way they navigated those products, right? And that's the other term, smart. What's smart really mean? In in our world, in consumer world, it's just connected. That's what we're calling smart, right? But in that world, it wasn't really. So it's just connected. So it's connected to your to your phone either through Bluetooth or through a hub, and so it had all these other things to jump through, and it was just giving you kind of feedback like your Nest would, right? Of this is what's going on in your home and all that. But there was really a disconnect there of like what the real value add is. And the real value add is well, you're monitoring this plant. So yes, it'll tell the consumer how to, what their plant's needs are and everything. But the data that you're collecting is way more impactful than just does this plant need water or not water, right? And if you're actually setting the sensors up correctly and monitoring, what to look for. And this is where I think really differentiates us from other competitors is we're one of the few that come from a scientific background, where a lot of the others are coming from a consumer plant hobbyist background, right? So they're just thinking about the product and how it interacts. We're on the side of, yes, we're going to make sure you're going to have a great experience, but we're really chasing after key questions that people want to study, right? Light, we have real, like that field of study is so new, and that's only taken off because of vertical farming. And so we know that there's a lot of R&D costs that are associated with that, and we can now collect that data for them. And so we can do more than just collect moisture levels. Let's collect pH levels, CO2 levels, nutrition levels, light intensity levels. Let's monitor how many photons of light these plants actually need,
Wow.
what part of the visible spectrum they care about. And that's the other thing is when you connect all of those different data points together, the picture becomes a lot bigger, right? And that's the other thing was a lot of our competitors, they only measure one or two things. They measure moisture and temperature. Well, moisture, temperature, and humidity. And they're all decoupled, right? So they're not actually syncing with each other and turning it into actually valuable data sets of, oh, it's because of this plant being at this part of the window, like what does actually indirect really mean? Has anyone actually quantified that down? No. But we are the ones that have actually quantified down to the number of photons. And so we can actually tell you in real time, like, no, you're like not in indirect light yet. Keep pulling it back. And then, okay, now you're indirect, right? And so there's a lot of that of just verbiage to actual what does that look like in reality, right? Of like, oh, this plant prefers filtered indirect light. From a consumer standpoint, it's like, cool. I'm going to put it right here.
That's what
We'll see if it likes it or not. And so that's really the big difference. And so again, our orbit revolves around the plant data, which means everything revolves around that. Every decision from our business model to our sensor selections to how well the software architecture to what the consumer's interacting with on the app is all centered around that decision.
And so the packaging is really the value delivered of just really in-depth and super accurate information, which I think is brilliant. But you've also made some packaging changes. I am a proud future owner of the Credo leaflet because I supported you on the crowdfunding campaign that you unfortunately is now closed. But I'm getting several units. And I like the strategy, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more as to why packaging several units instead of just selling them one off is so important to consumers like myself.
Sure. So the first was hardware as a revenue is a really bad revenue model.
Tell us why.
So your LTV, your customer acquisition cost ratios are all over the place.
And what's LTV?
Oh, sorry, lifetime value. So your lifetime value, right? So essentially you get a new customer. So it took money to acquire that customer. They buy a piece of hardware and then you never see them again. And so that's a really expensive model to operate under, right? Essentially, you're probably not even recuperating the costs of the spend to get that. Or if you are and you take into the margins of the hardware, you're probably running into the red now. And so that financial model has been really hard, and everyone knows that. And so that's why subscriptions have become more popular, right? And so, but subscriptions kind of have this kind of nasty smell about subscriptions of corporations trying to take advantage of you, locking you into long-term contracts, all of this. And really, you can kind of remove that in a little bit of a way. And so, but really at the end of the day for us though, was you buying one sensor from me is not enough. I need data and I need lots of it, right? So if you're just using that sensor for one plant at a time, that's not very valuable data to me. And it's not very valuable data to you. And that's actually how a lot of our competitors operate as well, right?
Indeed.
And so we also saw that in our surveying is, okay, there's a distinction between a hardware that's being used as a diagnostic tool. That becomes something that you can charge a lot for, right? I can charge you $400 for that tool. But essentially then you would have this magic tool that you can stick into a plant and it'll just scan it, read it, and be like, this is give you like a plant synopsis, right? Of like, this is the health, this is how happy it is. And unfortunately, that's not really possible at all. And it's because you need historical data. I need longitudinal data to know like, oh, where was this plant a couple months ago? What has this plant been experiencing? Then I can predict how it's doing and solve what's going to make it happier. So if I needed you to have a sensor to be there, then the price point has to be a lot cheaper, right? Now it has to be something that's like $5. And it's on that point, it's like, well, I can't manufacture a sensor that has this high tech of sensors in it to be $5. So then we evaluated like, oh, could we be a loss leader on this and we'll recuperate it at some other point? It's like, no, that doesn't really work either, right? Especially if I want you to have a lot of sensors. And this is where IoT started to kind of become a friction point for us, because if you think about IoT devices in a home, how many security cameras do you possibly need? How many doorbells could you possibly have, right? You never really need more than 10. I imagine 4 is probably like max. And so those economics work when it's only like 4 or less, but people with plants don't just have 4 plants.
No.
You either have some plants or you have a ton of plants. That's like, there's no in between. And so for the ones with a lot of plants, that's where it's like, well, if I'm not taking a loss leader, I pretty much need you to be a customer for 10 to 15 years to be profitable. And that's like, we can't wait that long. And so that's where this hardware as a service model came in, and that really kind of flattened the whole entire structure, and it alleviated the burden from you. And now you get to use the hardware all day long, and you can send it in, we'll service it, we'll maintain it, upgrade for free. And that whole decoupling of what is hardware really? Like, do we really want to own this type of stuff anymore? How often, like the second that you've gone with an iPhone or an Android phone, you've made a decision and you've probably stayed with that same manufacturer now for years and years and years to the point where I've had the iPhone since generation 3.
Yeah.
I'm probably not switching, and to the point where I know I'm gonna upgrade this phone to the next one when I need it, and so, like, yeah, I don't really wanna own this. I'd rather just have a subscription where it's just bottled into this monthly cost that I'm paying for anyway, and I know that, yeah, I'm gonna get the next iPhone, and so taking that concept and then really what that also creates, though, is sustainability, right? Of if Apple can get their phones back, they can recycle them. They can reuse components, they can use that for future phones, or they can even, just refurbish them and then tier it the way they do it right now where they sell like the older versions for a discounted price, right?
Indeed.
And so that's really how I see the future of consumers interacting with hardware, and we're really trying to push that forward.
Well, and I think what you're saying from a packaging standpoint as well as a pricing is that there's a tension between, your very high fixed costs as well as ongoing maintenance costs and the palatability that your buyer is willing to pay. I like the hardware as a service model. Personally, of course, I've signed up for it because it really alleviates me as a buyer of thinking through all these complications, right? And as you mentioned, as I bring in more plants, I'll just acquire more hardware. And for the record, I have 27 in my house. I counted before this because
Nice.
I wanted you to know, like, you're going to be stuck with me for a while.
Yeah, good.
And yeah, and my marginata told me this morning to say hello. But it's a very radical different packaging and pricing change compared to what the market is used to. So I'm excited to see how your approach will take off. Greg, I know at the beginning of Frontera's story, you had to make some really hard decisions about distribution and pricing. Can you tell us a little bit about the ones that you passed up?
Yeah, so relatively early in, so we're probably 7 or 8 years in now. We're kind of figuring it out. Walmart came to us and said they wanted to bring our product on. And Walmart has a whole different distribution model than every other customer that we were dealing with. And they would be able to meet their margin requirements by selling us at $2.99, which would be a buck below everybody else. And we really struggled with this because on one hand, that influx of money for us would have been, game changing. We would have been able to get out of Hawk, and it would have been amazing. But Walmart is huge. They're 40% of the market, but the other 60% of the market would have quickly discontinued us or ran away from us because they couldn't sell it at that same price point. So it was a really, really hard decision between, being able to, get out from under the double, triple mortgages that we put up on our house to fund the company, or stay with the slower, steady path that we were on. And, we spent a lot of time, sitting in the office late at night talking through this. And at the end of the day, we made the right decision. It was not the right time for us to go into Walmart. In fact, we never sold Frontera to Walmart. Frontera brand is in there now under the ConAgra when ConAgra purchased us. So all the way through our tenure, we chose not to do that. And at the end of the day, it was the right decision for us.
I agree. I think there's sacrifices that need to be made, not only with unit economics, but also with relationships. And it sounds as though you absolutely treasured the existing distribution channels, probably with the leading, food retailers at the time to continue to support your brand. But if you undercut them, then why would they continue to support you?
And it changes the whole perception of who you are. So who we were was about Whole Foods was one of our core customers, and Sprouts were one of our core customers, and Albertsons and Kroger. And, Whole Foods and Sprouts, we lived very well in that natural space, and we were. And then the premium upscale retailers that represented under the Albertsons and Kroger banner, and all those other guys, and Walmart would have changed that whole perception,
For sure.
not only of our price point, but who we were. and we weren't willing to do that. And so it was, at the end of the day, it was the right decision for us.
No, I think that's fantastic. So, pricing and packaging is really important. Both of you have shared your stories about looking at internally, and as well as what does it mean from a consumer perspective, as well as from a channel perspective. My favorite question to ask, and Eric, I'd love for you to answer it first, which is, if you were to give advice to founders who are evaluating different product packaging, pricing, as well as distribution channels, what sort of guidances or suggestions or rule of thumbs would you offer them?
I would say listen to your gut. So we found a lot of friction with what we wanted to do, right? With the laser etching, with the 3D printing, and a lot of people said it couldn't be done, or the price points just had to be this way, and we just didn't take that answer. We just weren't happy with it, and we just kept looking for it, and we made it work, right? And so sometimes it can't be done just because simply no one's paved the way forward, and this is the opportunity for you to do that and for you to figure it out. And that's a huge distinction and game changer between your company and the next one, right? Of taking that extra effort. And sometimes I do question, like, did we just waste a lot of time, energy, and effort? But I do come back to, like, no, this is the right move, because if we've paved laser etching as the way forward with packaging, now anyone can do this.
Sure.
And so now we can all have sustainable packaging, which is what our number one goal is. And so, yeah, listen to your gut. And we evaluated so many companies domestically on the packaging side, on the 3D printing side, and also just be iterative, right? Take the new data, keep thinking about, like, how do we get through this bottleneck or this friction point, and that's really the key to entrepreneurship, in my opinion.
I think that's wonderful advice, especially the part of listen to your gut, even if it's not what the competition has been doing or the market has accepted to date. That's innovation in itself. Greg, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs and founders who are looking at pricing and packaging right now?
Well, one of the things that hallmarks of our partnership were we had four very, very different people. We had a sales guy and myself, marketing guy and Manny. We had two chefs, and basically there was a lot. If I could tell you the amount of fighting that we did over just about every decision, we spent a lot of time going at each other over the course of our 17 years. So we had really robust discussions of just about everything. The other thing that we did is we had a lot of data points that we used to figure out. We had what was going on at the restaurant, and Rick was being very successful selling things that were not Tex-Mex. We would go out. We did store demos, or spent every weekend of the first 10 years of this company. All of us were out in stores all the time gathering data, and we had good customers that helped us figure out this thing. And so we challenged a lot of the things that were going on to make sure that we made good, sound decisions. Even though we were a small company, there was six of us at that point in time running the whole company. We treated it like a big company and tried to make decisions that were well thought out and well reasoned, and basically well fought out over time. And at the end of the day, we do have to make a decision. We didn't sit around and get analysis paralysis, but we had really robust discussions where people were on different sides. And it's really important to explore all the options. And I think that we had a diverse group of thinkers that allowed us to make good decisions, because we did hear a lot of different opinions on what we should do and how we should do it. So, the key in my mind is make sure that you've got sounding boards and people that you can bounce things off of, to make sure that you're not being so tunnel visioned that you're going to go down a road that doesn't end up being the right road. At least have visibility to all the options so that you can make the best choices.
For you, it sounds as though it's about having the data and having the debate, and having, just basically these samples of people and channels and founders to really think through all of these options before committing. I also know, Greg, that you are one of the most driven people when it comes to goals and KPIs or key performance indicators. You love reports and knowing exactly how things stand.
I'm an Excel geek. That's
Yes.
all there is to it.
Greg Keller is a mentor in the Boom Startup Accelerator community. I've watched him spend like over 100 hours mentoring founders, and he is always going straight to the spreadsheet. So that's no exaggeration.
Yep, absolutely.
I love it. And Eric, for you, it sounds as though, when you are an innovator, trust your instinct, even when it's telling you to do something different and to experiment. But you too kept your cost and your distribution in mind. It sounds as though your direct to consumer approach is still working, or direct to buyer approach is definitely the right path for you to go down. And it's so exciting to see your product launch and succeed. If people would like more information about the Credo leaflet, where do they get it?
Just look us up online. So go to credo.co and you can read about all of us, or just Google Credo.
And if people want to purchase the product?
This is kind of secret, but yeah, you guys can know about this. So the pre-order page is actually live. So if you guys actually want to go place orders right now, you can.
Congratulations.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Greg, as I mentioned, we have Frontera like every, we had a Taco Thursday. We not only did Taco Tuesday, but Taco Thursday. So we find you at our local grocery store as well. But Greg, if people want to work with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, sure. You can check me out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm part of the Boom Startup Accelerator program and enjoy working with you and your team, Tara. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. Again, this is Tara Spalding. It is my pleasure to share with you 10 preparation stages of starting a successful business. This is an ebook, although this is a printed copy that I'm holding, but you can download this copy, which has over 100 links to resources. Today's discussion with Greg and Eric, we're discussing the chapters on pricing and packaging and how important it is to just be flexible and persist. Thank you so much for joining us.